Hello, everyone, and welcome all to WorldGBC's Sustainable and Affordable Housing Report launch. As we join this webinar, please allow me to introduce you to the CEO of the World Green Building Council, Cristina Gamboa.
Hello, everyone. This is Cristina Gamboa, the CEO of the World Green Building Council. Thank you so much for joining us today for our flagship Sustainable and Affordable Housing Report. This ties into all aspects of our lives and goes hand in hand with yet another challenge, the global housing crisis. According to UN Habitat, the world needs to build 96,000 new affordable homes every day in order to house the 3 billion people who will need to access adequate housing by 2030. In all geographies of the world, people are facing homelessness, poverty, or living in substandard homes. Those people are at the heart of this flagship report. This report is a call to action for the uptake of sustainable and affordable housing in all global markets and geographies. Sustainable housing is not a mass market solution. Actually, sustainable homes should be seen as the ultimate investment, protecting the health of the occupant, increasing the property whilst minimizing energy consumption, and optimizing the life cycle of the asset of the house itself. The key theme underpinning this report is therefore that active collaboration across the sector is crucial to encourage best practice. Now, we recognize that there is not one size fits all for the industry, of course, and that is demonstrated throughout the report's many case studies from our global network of green building councils. But as the case studies show, the solutions are there. Strategies, policies, and projects are being activated across all regions of the world to address the housing challenge. It's not enough, but we have silver linings. I am grateful to our partners and the 16 Green Building Councils and the Better Places for People program task force who have co-developed their report with us. They have demonstrated that the leadership and pioneering activity is taking place, showing that housing can be affordable, sustainable, and fit for purpose for everyone, everywhere. Together we can do this. We are sending a wake-up call to the industry, we hope. A unified call will do wonders. It will drive the much-needed uptake of sustainable and affordable housing through policy, finance, design, and construction techniques, plus offer grassroots innovations. As the illuminating case studies in the report show, there is clear evidence that rapid progress is already being made to overcome the housing, climate, and health crisis combined. We just need wider uptake to scale the solutions that exist. I'm not denying that the task at hand is not a great one. It certainly is. But as always, WorldGBC's network is optimistic. And I know that as we collaborate on the solutions and spark consideration of best practices being implemented around the world, then we can get there much faster. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Cristina Gamboa, the CEO of the World Green Building Council, and welcome everyone to today's webinar, the second and last webinar for today to mark the launch of our Sustainable and Affordable Housing Report. My name is Sarah Kawamura, the Program Coordinator of WorldGBC's Better Places for People Global Program. I will be your host for today, and on behalf of the team at WorldGBC, we are delighted you can join us for our webinar today. In the next hour, we will hear from our expert speakers who will give us an overview of the Sustainable and Affordable Housing Report and also deep dive into topics around how we can make sustainable and affordable housing a reality for all, followed by Q&A and call to action. This whole session is live and interactive, so please do share your questions and comments in the chat box throughout, and take the opportunity to introduce yourselves to the rest of the audience. We will weave in some of your questions into the discussion today and also aim to answer them in the Q&A box. Please note this session is being recorded. And with that, allow me to begin with a few words on our global network. The WorldGBC Global Network is the world's most influential local, regional, global action network leading the sustainable transformation of the built environment, with over 75 green building councils, more than 60 partners, and over 46,000 members from across the 5 regions. Our vision is sustainable and decarbonized built environments for everyone, everywhere. We realize our vision through a strategic focus on 3 systemic areas that we recognize need change: climate action, resources and circularity, and health, equity, and resilience. And these are aligned with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, as well as the Paris Agreement targets. We deliver this systemic change through our 3 dedicated global programs: Advancing Net Zero, Better Places for People, and Circular Built Environment Accelerator. Our webinar for today and the Sustainable and Affordable Housing Report is produced under the Better Places for People global program that is dedicated to human health, equity, and resilience in the built environment. So do check out our work if you're interested in the social side of the built environment. And many thanks to our partners, Bureau Happold and Saint-Gobain, for their unwavering support. Here is a quick snapshot of the 34 green building councils from across the 5 regions who sit on our Better Places for People steering committee, accelerating the uptake of healthy, equitable, and resilient built environments on a local and regional level. And with that, I would like to invite Johanna Varghese, Program Manager of the Irish Green Building Council. Joanna is a registered architect with a master's in regional and urban planning. She successfully managed and completed 2 EU projects, Smarter Finance for Families and Turnkey Retrofit Homeowners-Centric Renovation Journey. She currently divides her time between managing projects, creating content for training videos, and designing inclusive workshops to encourage more informed decision-making. It is a pleasure to have you with us, Joanna. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Sarah. So I'll start about the report. Over the past year, we at the Irish Greens program partners and knowledge partners worked together on the Better Sustainable and Affordable Housing Report. We collaborated on this work to spotlight action from geographies across the WorldGBC's network that are succeeding in working towards sustainable and affordable housing in their communities and cities. So why is this topic so important, and why did we decide to tackle it? Climate change and man-made disasters are damaging, resulting in housing inaccessibility for millions of people worldwide. Vulnerability is heightening, impacting livability with severe reduction in people's health, well-being, and quality of life. Comprising over 70% of land use in most cities already, housing is evidently central to future cities and urban development. Housing infrastructure can continue to exacerbate problems or can be part of the solution. The global building and construction industry needs a monumental shift. The good news is that the knowledge, tools, techniques, and technologies to allow for the uptake of sustainable and affordable housing already do exist and are being implemented around the world. This report presents a high-level summary of sustainable and affordable housing around the world, profiling challenges facing the housing sector and opportunities available that are driving the uptake of new solutions and approaches, illustrated by local examples documented from within the World Green Building Network. But what does sustainable and affordable housing mean? Sustainable and affordable housing should not only capture the monetary value of the housing itself, but also the ongoing affordability, household maintenance, utilities, or location in relation to transport, employment, and services. Through consultation with the Better Places for People Housing Task Force, WorldGBC's network defines sustainable and affordable housing as resilient housing that is adaptable to climate change, respects and protects the life cycle vision of meeting current and future needs, whilst encouraging sustainable choices and enhancing quality of life, all within an economically accessible manner. Continuation of business as usual in the housing sector will lead to dramatic negative environmental, social, and financial consequences felt by all stakeholders of the built environment. This report includes a business case for making housing sustainable and affordable, including opportunities for actions such as increased energy security, reduced carbon emissions and waste, greater resilience and quality of life of population, and risk of inaction such as risk of stranded assets, environmental degradation, and health risks. The WorldGBC network also concluded that sustainable and affordable housing in any and all geographies must reflect implementation of the following 5 principles with consideration of the cross-cutting nature of many of the topics. These 5 principles are 1. Habitability and comfort, which covers topics such as human rights, dignity, and an environment. 2. Community and connectivity, which covers topics such as inclusive design, transport services, and culture and community. 3. Resilience and adaptation to a changing climate, which includes adaptability, nature-based solutions, safety, and disaster resilience. 4. Resource efficiency and circularity, which includes net zero whole life carbon, energy and water efficiency, and waste. And 5, economic accessibility, which includes purchase prices, living, and development costs. The bulk of the report presents a high-level summary of sustainable and affordable housing around the world, illustrated with local examples documented from within WorldGBC's network. Each regional snapshot includes challenges facing the housing sector, opportunities driving the uptake of sustainable and affordable housing, and case studies which include cutting-edge built environment projects, demonstrating a commitment towards the right to adequate housing and a sustainable future. There are 18 case studies in total, all within 30% of area median income. One of the case studies presented is from Ireland, and on behalf of the Irish Green Building Council, it has been a pleasure working and contributing to this report. This case study from Ireland is a 40-unit certification under the Home Performance Index that assesses quality and sustainability in residential developments. It's based on 5 categories of verifiable indicators and a point scoring system for environment, economy, health and well-being, quality assurance, and sustainable location. Actually, every case study in the report reflects all 5 principles of sustainable and affordable housing. For the Irish case study, in terms of habitability and comfort, this development achieved good indoor environmental quality through monitoring carbon dioxide levels, relative humidity, and internal temperature. For community and connectivity, the development is assessed on the sustainability of the location of housing based on accessibility measurements relating to public transport, schools, and amenities. For resilience and adaptation to climate change, the development addresses biodiversity for plants and animals using a 10-step plan, assessing and calculating the ecology of the area. The development is also energy efficient for resource efficiency and circularity. And finally, it's social housing, so it is economically accessible with low energy bills for all of its units. The challenges faced worldwide are numerous, but there is a growing body of evidence of progress and opportunities seen from around the world. The call to action and recommendations in the report are derived from real-life analysis, best practice, and successful practices and themes that have already been implemented and applied in the 18 case studies from the many countries. These range from policy change, finance solutions, community participation, and strategies in practice for a sustainable built environment. I'd like to encourage you to follow the link in the slide or the QR code to read, download, and share the Sustainable and Affordable Housing Report. There are a lot of interactive elements to the report, so make sure to click on them and hope you enjoy reading it. Thank you, and back to you, Sarah.
Thank you very much, Joanna. It's been fabulous working with you and having the Irish Green Building Council on board for this report and to learn of more of the great work being done locally. So thank you very much for joining us. And with that, it's now time for our panel. There is a huge amount to discuss here today, so please do share your questions with us through the Q&A box, and our moderator will weave them into the conversation. And it's my absolute pleasure to introduce our moderator and speaker, Andrea Fidalgo, Europe Program Manager for the Built Environment and at the Institute of Human Rights and Business, Nordic. Andrea's professional mission centers on championing the principles of dignity in the built environment and just transitions. She is involved in policy research and advocacy, collaborating with governments, investors, and businesses to advocate for a social equity approach in built projects. Joining Andrea on the panel, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Timo Marquez, Sustainability Marketing Manager at Saint-Gobain. Timo supports Saint-Gobain's global business development, develop sustainable solutions on 3 pillars: carbon and energy, circularity and resources, and health and well-being. He supports Saint-Gobain's regional marketing team to advocate for more sustainable markets and share their expertise and best practices. Next, we have Louise Folks, Caribbean Programs and Engineering Manager at Build Change. Louise is a structural engineer passionate about resilient, affordable, equitable, and sustainable housing. Her work focuses on homeowner-driven approaches to disaster prevention and reconstruction throughout the region, from earthquakes to climate change disasters, building assets, pre- and post-disaster construction supervision. And finally, we have Jose Manuel Avila, Technical Director of Guatemala Green Building Council. Jose has worked as an architect for the design and planning of commercial interior projects and residential projects, and as a sustainability consultant applied to the built environment. At Guatemala GBC, he leads projects for the development, measurement, and verification of sustainability applied to the built environment. It is an absolute pleasure to have you all with us today. And Andrea, on to you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for the lovely introductions to me and to all the panelists. And I would also like to thank you to the Better Place for People program, and all the great contributors for the Sustainable and Affordable Housing Task Force that made this report possible. So in the next half an hour, we will be discussing some of the main challenges and opportunities, and how can we progress across the sector around sustainable and affordable housing. So the question here is, can we make it a reality for all? And I would like to start by asking Timo. Timo, what do you see as the key barriers preventing the uptake of sustainable and affordable housing, and what are the solutions here?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining the call and for the invitation. Thanks for the question, Andrea. So in terms of barriers and potential solutions, I see a couple of barriers that are at the same time opportunities if we address them correctly. Not necessarily in any specific order, but probably one of them is still a training of installers and workers on job sites. Usually when we think about affordable housing, we also talk about individual homeowners or do-it-yourself or professionals don't necessarily have all the expertise and competence to make sure that the house or the project they're working on complies with all the sustainability criteria we think about. So that's something we still need to probably keep on working to improve the level. Another one, and coming back to the initial presentation at the beginning on the 5 principles, sometimes the translation or more clear translation of those principles within the project briefs are not necessarily clear. Obviously, we understand that affordable housing, they have to comply with a minimum requirements, low requirements at the regional level. But it would be interesting and encouraging to see these principles being translated into those contracts and documentation in terms of connectivity and community, circularity and resource efficiency, on top of habitability and comfort. And probably a last one in terms of also barriers and opportunities, like synergies that could be done from a financial perspective, especially from the government side. You obviously have the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs in different countries, but if them being able to tackle jointly with the Ministry of Energy, the Ministry of Environment, because housing is not just 4 walls and a roof, it's also the quality of air, it's also how they're heated and cooled. Obviously, a more integrated synergy between actors will support and address these potential barriers.
Thank you so much, Timo. And just taking from what you said, there's definitely a lot of barriers, but also a lot of opportunities here. And from a global organization's perspective, as the Institute for Human Rights and Business, I think that making sustainable and affordable housing a reality for all definitely will require a multifaceted approach. We will need to advocate for favorable policies and regulations, and this, for example, might involve changing zoning laws, tax incentives, subsidies, but we also need to develop collaborations within governments, like Timo, you were just saying, nonprofit organizations, private sector entities, local communities, and international bodies, because each of them has a unique role and resources to contribute with. We need to work with financial institutions, impact investments, governmental bodies to increase funding, to increase investments in sustainable housing projects. And we also need to leverage technology and innovation to decrease the costs and improve sustainability. And we need to definitely, like you were saying, educate and train individuals, but also the communities about sustainable living and housing, because this can lead to more demand and also appreciation for such initiatives. And given my work with human rights, I think that we can only make sustainable and affordable housing a reality by first acknowledging that housing is a human right. And we need to encourage business to respect human rights in their operations. We need to promote multi-stakeholder collaborations and advocating for policies that support these objectives. But Louise, from theory to practice, what are the steps that you and Build Change are taking to make sustainable and affordable housing a reality for all?
Thanks, Andrea. Yeah, I think there's really a lot of synergy of how we're working with exactly what both you and Timo were just saying. So at Build Change, we find solutions to make disaster resilient housing available to everybody. And we're proud to have made over 1 million people and 200,000 buildings safer worldwide. And I think we've done this, we've implemented this along the same areas that you were just saying. So we work typically around 3 areas: policy, money, and technology, all of which are needed to make housing a reality for all. Policy is driving the demand, technology drives the supply, and then the finance kind of connects the two. As an example, on policy in Nepal, we developed guidelines for how to retrofit the key vulnerabilities in stone and mud mortar homes, which are widely built throughout the country, but they're particularly vulnerable to collapse in earthquakes. And the National Reconstruction Authority in the country adopted these guidelines. And so as a result, the Nepali authorities understand the key vulnerabilities of these houses, and they're much better equipped to support retrofit program interventions. On the money side, we support the developments of both government-led and market-based solutions for housing finance, as well as facilitating investment through philanthropic and lending institutions. And then finally, on the technology side, we're really looking at ways to take kind of international best practice and all this great architecture and engineering design and make it simple and make it accessible to people through training, through simple manuals and design guides, codes, if that's what's needed. And then complementing that, finding ways to scale it, which generally involves using technology.
Thank you, Louise. And Build Change definitely shows how it's possible to make sustainable and affordable housing. Now on to Jose. Jose, are you seeing progress and solutions driving the uptake of sustainable and affordable housing in Guatemala?
Hi, thank you, Andrea, and well, thank you all of you for the invitation. I will just like to start with many people have worked really hard and honored to push these initiatives, so I feel honored to be here in presentation of all of them. And yeah, before talking about our affordable housing context, I would like to share a bit of Guatemala City's experience in relation of housing development. And I will try to resume almost 30 years for story in order to try to understand this context. I will do it in about 2 sentences, but for those who don't know, Guatemala City is Guatemala's capital, right? Is home to one of the largest sources of employment, commercial development, and urban development in the country. So obviously generates an effect of migration of people from other departments to the metropolitan region. And in addition to this, in 1970s, Guatemala experienced a fairly strong earthquake that, although most of the city was successfully rebuilt, many people were forced to rebuild their homes on informal settlements that are homes of generations of families now these days. So these settlements, although they have managed to equip themselves with essential urban services such as access of water and electricity, they do not have the quality service operation that will require the formal house, you know, and in addition of being local in high-risk areas. So under this 2 sentences of 30 years of Guatemala City history, under this context and the need for resilience projects and the hope of successfully start moving people from these settlements to formal houses, in 2019, the Priority Housing Regulation of Guatemala was approved. This achievement was thanks to the efforts of Municipality of Guatemala and housing developers interested to serve as a vulnerable sector of the population through resilience and residential buildings. The condition for these projects was that these projects needed to be in urban locations and have affordable pricing. Now, being low-cost urban projects, these projects are entitled to various incentives by the local municipality through this regulation, such as reduction of parking spaces below grade, reduction of construction license cost, in such a way that each residential unit has to cost around $30,000, which is about a quarter of the average cost of a 2-bedroom apartment here in Guatemala City. No? Now, in addition to this, Municipality of Guatemala, in the latest reform of this regulation, they offer a 25% reduction rate for construction license cost in projects that are certified with a national or international green building certification program. So this encourages developers to take more into account the incorporation of green building practices to these projects. A certification tool that has won a lot of interest for these projects in the last 3 years was our local certification program of Guatemala Green Building Council, Casa Guatemala. The Casa Guatemala pilot program was developed around 5-7 years ago by the technical department of the Guatemala Green Building Council, and its main objective was to address sustainable housing development, which at the time was not being addressed by other certification systems. Currently, the program is on its version 1.1 and has around 50 projects in certification process. Around 8 of these projects are projects with the affordable vision. And we hope this year in October, we'll be launching our second version of Casa Guatemala. What is exciting for us is that we've been evolving and understanding the needs and challenges of residential projects, especially for affordable housing. So the next version of Casa Guatemala will be focused on measurement and verification of aspects that contribute to the adaptation and resilience for housing projects. We're looking forward to it and working very hard to it because the idea is that in addition to sustainability practices, CASA can measure the contribution to urban projects and resilience, and perhaps through this, projects may obtain better investment conditions, better finance conditions, as well as the buyers and the owners for these projects. You know. I know I think I said a lot in this minute that I have, but that was the context of what's been happening since 30 years ago, and these initiatives, really relatively new initiatives that we've been working and pushing on.
Thank you so much, Jose. And I would like to ask you, as a segue to what you just said, that are you seeing that these, for example, these tax incentives and these programs are easy to access by the common population, or are these targeted more at business and corporations? Because, for example, and I can give a practical example from my home country, Portugal, where we do have programs and we do have tax incentives, but the bureaucratical processes around it and the way that they are written are not accessible to the common people. So it's very difficult for them to actually make use of these tax incentives and make use of these programs. So is this the case also in Guatemala?
Not at the moment, but it's been working on. The municipality focused their initiatives on the development, you know, with the percentage of reduction of municipality construction costs, but banks are now working as well for the developer to offer a better finance conditions, but they have been working on products to the buyer, to the owner of this home, because these people who buy an affordable house, an urban affordable house, sometimes are part of the informal sector, of the economical informal sector here in Guatemala. Sometimes they don't even have bank's accounts. So it's really hard sometimes for them to get a loan in order to buy a property. So banks are working on how they can better their conditions in order to they can access to a loan for these projects. To a tax level, there's not been any advance here in Guatemala, but from the municipality and financial institutions, there's a lot of work that's been playing on these days in order to have these better conditions for the owner, for the people, no, who buy this house.
Yes, thank you, Jose. And I do think that government needs to have a leading role in order to allow for sustainable housing to be developed, and also to guide the private sector. And now on to Timo. Timo, from the private sector perspective, how can we make sustainable and affordable housing a reality for all? And do you have any advice you can give to other corporations wishing to play their part in increasing the uptake of sustainable and affordable housing?
Yes, thanks for the question. It's a large question. I cannot probably talk about all the private sector stakeholders, but I will try to share some experiences that I've had. I think probably one of the most important ones when talking about affordable and sustainable housing, as the title of our activity, is to really understand the user needs of what they think or they perceive it's an affordable, sustainable housing. Obviously, by the affordable, they have the conception of cost. So they would expect, like lower cost in terms of, products and materials and other things like that. But understanding what sustainability is for affordable housing goes a little bit beyond the price factor. And I think that the private sector probably needs to get closer to the end user and stakeholders to better address those needs. And I would like to just share two examples from where I've lived before on that topic. One of them is related to insulation. Obviously, depending on the location, you need insulation to avoid heat coming in or heat coming out. You want to prevent those things. So the concept of insulation in some parts of the users is not necessarily well understood. And I'll give you an example of when I lived in Maracaibo, in my home city. We were doing a workshop with a community leaders. They were trying to address how they would like their buildings to be built in the future. And we were doing sessions on sustainability, talking about circularity, water efficiency, and other topics. And when we talk about the topic of insulation, the concept was well understood to try to prevent energy from being lost, because Maracaibo is a hot city, so they use a lot of air conditioning. So they use how to minimize the energy consumption and not to pay higher bills on electricity. And the funny thing in terms of really understanding and sharing the experience of what low energy consumption house is was the topic of insulation. And we talk about, when they ask the question, okay, insulation is good, but what is insulation made of? And if you talk, from a technical perspective, you say, it's a expanded polystyrene as an example. And the first thing that came to their mind is like, okay, expanded polystyrene is not concrete. It's not as strong as concrete. It breaks. It's not safe. So I don't want my house made of a polystyrene. So it's like the story of the three little pigs of how your house is made. So the perception of sustainability for affordable housing from the perspective of safety is important to take into account. In saying that, having a house that has layers, and one of those layers being a polystyrene, would not make the house less sturdy or less strong than other materials. So it was a topic of really understanding what the perception of sustainable affordable housing from the end consumer for the private sector to either create awareness, communicate better the potential and the impact of the products for them to better use. Another example that I like to share was when I was living in the south of Chile. So obviously it's a cold weather, and House of Chile affordable housing, it's quite strong because either heating your house is quite expensive. So usually you're cold all the time throughout the day. Some houses are not well insulated. So we were doing an experiment on some houses to understand how the affordable houses were built, what construction materials, etc., but also to understand the thermal comfort of the people inside those houses. So we were doing the experiment for a couple of weeks to understand the difference of energy consumption and comfort of the person inside. And for one of those weeks, at the charge of the company, we paid the heating expensive to maintain a constant temperature of 18 degrees throughout a week in the winter. The results are obviously you need to improve the facade and everything to achieve a better thermal comfort. But the phrase that the lady shared with us in terms of the quality of life, if you have a proper affordable and stable house, was interesting. She said, I never thought a person could live like this. That means experiencing 1 week of not being cold all the time in winter. That phrase for me shocked me a lot, because we understand different stakeholders in different sectors, where obviously being at a comfortable temperature throughout the winter, for them sometimes it's a luxury. And affordable housing, sustainable affordable housing should not be considered a luxury, not only from the material point of view, but also to maintain that quality of life that they should have within. So I think, coming back to the question of what can the private sector do to improve this, is obviously get closer to the end user, to understand the perception and conceptions they have on this topic, to make it clear of what it could be a sustainable, affordable housing, not only in terms of potential price, but also in terms of comfort, in terms of quality of life, etc.
Thank you, Timo. Really relevant points. One of the things that we are always advocating in our work is this, exactly what you were saying, the central role that end users and communities have in the decision-making process, and how they should be meaningful. They should meaningful participate in the decision-making process. And sometimes it's because either governments or private entities don't bring them to the discussion, but a lot of times is lack of knowledge. And like you were saying, one important step into involving the community and the end user into housing projects is definitely capacity building and education, raise awareness for what is needed, type of materials, what is advocating for living more sustainable, try to understand how materials work. And like you were saying, I found it really interesting, this paradox between a sturdy material as cement, that in the industry we've been all advocating for. We need to create other sources of material other than cement, and the perception that we have, especially I guess older generations, that if you have a sturdy house made of brick and cement, then it will hold. So thank you for that point. And Louise, on to you. So despite all the opportunities at hand, do you think that is sustainable and affordable housing really within reach for all people in every region of the world? And here I'm talking about affordability, access, resources, and financial perspectives. And do you think that the change in the global housing market should be top-down or bottom-up?
Well, first of all, is it accessible to everybody? Yes, I think it absolutely is within reach. One of our core principles at Build Change is meeting people where they are. And I think there are just so many improvements that can be made to homes that are easy and are low cost to implement. And we don't always have to bring a house up to be fully code compliant. I'm an engineer, and I think sometimes engineers are guilty of wanting to create these fortresses. But we don't have to do that to make houses safer. There are so many simple things we can do. Just adding ring beams in an earthquake zone makes a huge difference. Tying down roofs or adding shutters to windows in hurricane zones makes a huge difference to saving lives and reducing economic losses from the damages. And I think it's not just technical solutions as well. In the Philippines, Build Change has been working for about a decade to innovate on how we can shape housing finance to support homeowners at all income levels. So we work with local microfinance institutions there, and we've developed a series of loan products for homeowners to incrementally strengthen and improve their homes. And these loans are offered to their existing clients, so they've already proven their credit worthiness and their ability to repay. And we found that 95% of the borrowers are women, and that they have a 99% repayment rate. And these are very low loans that for very small amounts. They're very simple technical interventions. Homeowners can also do improvements that they want to make their homes more comfortable and more efficient, at the same time as making these structural improvements. I think the point is really that homeowners at all income classes deserve to have access to housing that is safe, resilient, sustainable, affordable. And I think it's our job to find those solutions, whether that's technical, financial, or in policy, or a combination of all three. And I think we have to dispel this notion that housing can't be accessible, because it can be, it should be. And what we need to do is scale the solutions that already exist. I think the second part of your question was about whether this should be top down or bottom up. And just to quickly respond to that, I think it has to be both. It has to be a systems change perspective. So it's equally important and equally as urgent to advocate and shift the government policies as it is to kind of drive that bottom up demand for resilient housing amongst people. I think without the framework of what resilient housing means, you know, homeowners and builders, how will they know what the safety standards are? And then without the demand from the bottom, what's the point in developing the standards? So I really think it has to be both.
I couldn't agree more. I think that, you know, the built environment sector has several opportunities to enhance the uptake of sustainable and affordable housing. And many of these opportunities intersect in different areas and different fields. For example, we have technological innovation. We have, for example, 3D printing technology. We have prefabricated components, and those can help reduce construction time and waste. But we also have green technologies such as solar panels, energy efficient appliances, smart home systems that can also enhance sustainability. We do need and have for policy reforms, like, for example, changing zoning laws, building codes, tax policy that can create incentives for sustainable and affordable housing, for example. Like you were saying, work with impact investment and financial investment, for example, green bonds or other forms of impact investment that can provide the necessary capital for sustainable housing projects while also addressing environmental and social challenges. And we definitely, like both you, Timo, and Jose already all said, that we need multi-stakeholder collaboration. We need to bring together the different actors such as architects, engineers, urban planners, governments, financiers, but definitely also community leaders. So Jose, with all this being said, how can we create a business case for sustainable, affordable housing, and what conditions do we need? Without wanting to put you on check here, but can you give us a solution?
Well, I don't know if I can give you the solution, but I think what you have been mentioning, I think it's really important. Above all, we need people who are willing to share the experience in from a transparent position, from financial institution, investors, developments, basically all participants, all stakeholders, and all shareholders to basically know their experience, right? Business cases are built on technical information, but also on financial analysis, right? And the experience of what was successful and what can be improved. So this information at the end is super valuable to local governments and public and financial entities to know how to create better conditions that guarantee sustainable development. So I think that will be my first idea on how to create a business case. But from the technical aspect, I think understanding all the variables that the business case may have, it's really important. One might be is understanding the context, no? For example, only in Guatemala, we have a diversity of social context, and I'm sure that many parts of the world, they do as well. So from Guatemala's perspective, for example, I wish to have more projects and more initiatives outside of Guatemala City to understand what's happening in the urban regions, but also in the rural areas, because their conditions and sometimes their needs are very different. So I think understanding those social contexts is very important. And since we've been talking about resilience or adaptations, or at least for our side of the ocean, We as a country, for example, and as a region as well, are very vulnerable to climate conditions and climate change. So Guatemala as a country is usually considered to have warm tropical climate, but we are so diverse that we have different climate conditions within our country. We have warm, humid climates, we have warm and dry, we have cold climates in the mountain regions, we have places with a lot of rain, we have places without rain conditions. So people have different needs and also they have different vulnerabilities. So I think a business case as a study case in general could approach these conditions as well to understand, well, it's affordable, but how it's supporting to resilience for families and for a country as well. Those are my ideas. I'm putting here in the table, and we can discuss discuss it a little bit more detail. I think beside the webinar, but those are my opinions.
Thank you, Jose. And I do invite all the audience to please use the Q&A box to direct any questions that you have to either of us. So, Timo, can you tell us about any Saint-Gobain initiative that you have at heart in relation to affordable housing? And can you elaborate a bit on what was the impact and if it's replicable? Because like Jose was saying, there's no one size fits all, and we need to look at the diversity not only of the community, the diversity of needs, but also the geographical conditions, the climate conditions. So can you tell us about one initiative from Saint-Gobain and if it is replicable elsewhere?
Yes, I have one in mind that is quite recent. When I say quite recent, we finalized it last year and it's continuing right now. And right now we're in the process of how to expand it even further. It's not specifically on a building per se, but also more likely the network of the impact of how to bring about affordable housing to a neighborhood. So it's within the Saint-Gobain Argentina team. And in this discussion we have had within Saint-Gobain about how to bring about affordable housing, the team said one of the issues we see is with the low income and more informal settlements. What type of construction they have, where are they, sourcing their materials? Do they have the local capacity buildings to construct well? So they were thinking, what can we do to address that market? Not only improving our products, but how can we be closer to them and help them how to better construct? And the solution they found was they went to this neighborhood and they talked to a local material distributor. Obviously, when people want to improve their houses, they have to buy it somewhere. So they went to this place to buy materials. The interesting thing when you talk about this actor, this stakeholder, is like, due to his size, also the informality, he has to travel inside the city to another retailer to buy materials to them for him to resell it. So he's not being able to buy at wholesale, which would improve obviously the final price of the user. So you see these actors, they have many middlemen between them and the whole manufacturer to get products, which makes the final price more expensive, but also the experience on capacity information, technical information not necessarily available. So the Saint-Gobain team worked with him hand in hand to see how we could structure a way for him to be able to formalize more his business, to be able to buy directly from us and avoid all the middlemen in between. That would mean that for him, he would have a better price than he was having before. And that means also the end users are going to be purchasing the products would have a better price for them to install. At the same time, the Saint-Gobain Argentina team, they did a capacity buildings for the local workers in the area, for them to say, now you're going to be buying Saint-Gobain products and this is how to install them, so there were a couple of sessions on how to aboard that. The experience has gone already for about 8 months, and right now they're thinking about how to replicate it to other similar type of neighborhoods. So this is like an interesting aspect of changing a little bit the go-to market between a player like Saint-Gobain and local communities that probably they don't have either the training materials or the quality of materials to be able to put them into the place that they live. So this is quite interesting. Right now we're thinking how to expand it not only within Buenos Aires, which is where the project was located, but also within the rest of Argentina, and how can we replicate it into other countries.
Thank you so much, Timo. And definitely that the private sector needs to lead on innovation and also on sustainable development. And now we have a question from the audience. And it was actually, this is really interesting because this was also the next question that I had to Louise. So I'll just direct this to Louise, but Timo and Jose, please feel free. Louise, how do we address the misconception that sustainable housing is more expensive? That it's difficult to resource and it's intensive to pursue. How can we challenge this common perception?
Yes, to whoever asked that from the audience, it was perfect timing. And I think we need to look at the data. Sustainable, resilient housing doesn't have to be expensive. Again, if we go back to these simple, easy to implement solutions first, WorldChange actually published a report last year. It's available for free on our website called The Cost of Improving Vulnerable Housing. And from looking at the hundreds of home improvements and new construction homes that we've done over the last 20 years around the world, the average came out that it costs just 23% to retrofit a house as it would to build a new construction house in the same location. So a big learning for us from that was that often the most sustainable house is actually the one that already exists, and maybe we just need to be improving that existing housing. And in that report, we also looked at what happens if we work preventatively pre-disaster rather than post-disaster. I think a big driver of this is that we know there's increasing frequency of climate-related disasters. We know we also need to look at kind of preventative resilience alongside sustainability in the kind of traditional green sense. And we found that it costs 6 times more to repair after a disaster than it would to have made those improvements prior to the disaster and avoid all the damage repairs that you'd need to do. So yeah, I think really the huge learning for us has been that it doesn't have to be more expensive. Look at the data, present, make people aware of the data, make people aware of the cost. And then for us, the biggest learning is that just working with existing housing and making that more sustainable is the cheapest way to go.
Thank you, Louise. And now my final question is to Jose. And Jose, I'd like to ask you to be very brief, if possible. But if you could share an overview of Trascienda la Parroquia, which is a case study that comes in the report, and then maybe can also shed a light on this preconception of that sustainable building is more expensive.
Yeah, of course. Well, Trasciende la Parroquia is a special project for us for many reasons. Yeah, like you said, is the business case in the report, and we have the inside joke that we mention every time that we have the chance. But I think beyond the study case, it was a game-changing initiative to the sector and for what it came after. In that instance, I wish to extend also my congratulations once again to the developers and all the people who participate in this project. But Trasciende la Parroquia was the first pilot project approved under this priority housing regulation that I was talking about in Guatemala, and also was the first Casa Guatemala certified project on his pilot version. So the project has 2 public transport stations at distance between 400 meters from the main entrance, and has more than 10 urban facilities within a walkable distance. So this project was developed on a previously developed area, so it did not require the use of new land spaces. It minimized the environmental impact of land use changes. And due to the urban density in which it was located, the project was able to reduce the parking footprint requirement established by our local construction codes. So it did not require excavations for underground parking, reducing the cost of construction. Remember, I was told you about these projects has to cost around $30,000 for sale. So in order to achieve that, but they need to be really efficient on the surrounding and on the construction conditions in order to achieve these prices. In water efficiency, something really interesting happened after this project was developed. Although the project did not meet the minimum water efficiency required by CASA at the moment, it did present significant projections that represent around 20%, if I'm not mistaken, of water consumption reduction compared to the 200 local occupants per day required by a local municipality. But the interesting thing here is that through this project, the municipality of Guatemala realized that supplying water to what used to be probably a workshop or a small business in this sector to more than 70 residential units per project, the water supply was not going to be easy. So therefore, in 2020, the municipality of Guatemala approved a municipal ordinance for the use of water-saving fixtures and establish a local baseline for water consumption. So any new project built in Guatemala City must present water-saving fixtures in order to be constructed. Also, since public infrastructure was not originally designed for a vertical construction, the project needed to implement strategies to avoid discharge of large volumes of stormwater runoff. Dense urban areas are also propense to flooding. So this type of strategy are for the well of the surrounding as well. Also, this project also encourage this new affordable housing market to consider green building strategies. And many of them, we see it because many of affordable housing projects are using Casa Guatemala as their certification program. From the 15 projects that we have under a certification process, 8 are affordable housing in urban areas. No, so to conclude, a lesson learned by the parties involved in order to guarantee affordable conditions to this project is that they must have the character of sustainability and resilience as well. These type of projects are built in densified urban areas, which they will require a rainwater management system. Also, it's not the same water supply for an ancient workshop or a parking lot that the one will need 70 or 100 residential units. So water saving is vital, so the municipality service can provide them with water. And so for this very reason, affordable housing, sustainability and resilience must go on hand in hand. And to support the original question, I think how can we convince people that it's not expensive? I think is first recognize that sustainability is measured through efficiency. So that benefits will be found in the operation and maintenance for the project, but that they will also have a direct effect on the creation of high performance project, but also more resilient projects. So that's the integrated benefits that we can find within sustainability practice and rebuilding practice, efficiency practice through energy, water, sustainable sites, and many of the strategies that we can find and we can apply to our projects.
Thank you so much, Jose. And I invite everybody to read more about this project on the report. And like this one, there's a lot of other case studies that are really interesting and a really good showcase on how can we build or rebuild sustainable and affordable housing that are accessible to all. So now, before we finalize, and given that we are already 3 minutes past the mark time to finish, I'd just like to ask Timo, Luis, and Jose if they have any final words. And if in 30 seconds you have any final remarks that you would like to share with the rest of the audience, please. Yes. Luis, do you want to start?
Sure, yeah, no, I'll just express my thanks for inviting us to be here. It's been a really inspirational webinar, and I think it's just such a fantastic report. To me, housing is an urgent problem, so we should be treating it like one. I think the solutions are out there. We've been doing them at Build Change. There's so many fantastic case studies in the report. So let's get to work. Let's scale them and let's do them.
Thank you, Louise. Timo, any final words?
Yes, from my side, I would probably reinforce the need to have a multi-stakeholder engagement on the topic. Obviously, financing is an important one, but also, you know, a appropriate design, not only of the housing, but the urban site. Material resourcing, not only from raw materials, but also products, training. And for all that to happen, to have a good quality home that addresses sustainability throughout the whole life cycle of its use, all the stakeholders have to be involved to achieve those objectives.
Thank you, Timo. And finally, Jose.
Well, like Luis said, read the report. It has very interesting cases from around the world. So, and I think WorldGBC's team made an excellent work putting those together. It looks really, really nice. So, yeah, please check it, because I was just reading it before the webinar, and it looks also outside the content, it looks really, really beautiful. So, congratulations also for that.
Thank you all. And just to finalize, a message also from my side. And so we are at a crossroads in addressing an urgent need for sustainable and affordable housing everywhere in the world. This is a global problem. The challenges are significant, but also are the opportunities. And to create a future where everyone has access to sustainable and affordable housing, we must act now, and we must act together. And we all need to remember that housing is more than a roof over our heads, is a fundamental human right. And each of us has a responsibility to uphold this right. So together we can build homes that are not only a shelter, but that also nurture our planet and our future generations. Thank you so much. Sarah, back to you.
Thank you very much for this eye-opening discussion. It's so great to hear of the so many perspectives and to really see that affordable housing is achievable, right? It is attainable and accessible to all, with many solutions and progress that you have shared with us today and discussed today. So thank you all so much for working very tirelessly in this field and sharing your work and expertise with us. And with that, it's time for us to close our webinar today. I'd like to thank every single one of you for joining this session, wherever you are in the world. And I hope that hearing from this phenomenal range of speakers has really crystallized that urgency for attainable and sustainable, well, the attainability of sustainable and affordable housing. So please do read, download, and share the report. You can see this through the QR code on the pages. We also have a link that we shared on the chat box, so you can go through that to check it out. And many thanks again to the Green Building Council's partners and knowledge partners for the in-depth collaboration over the past year. And we really hope you enjoy it, and we always welcome some feedback, and please do stay in touch. So thank you very much for joining us.